you talking on that?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Matthew Klippenstein. I'm hosting this event on behalf of CHFCA, Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association. We'll get going in a few minutes here. Masood had noted that it was a bit eerie having absolute silence while everyone waited. So I just want to pipe in, say hold tight, and we'll get going very soon. Thank you all for joining us. All right, Matthew Klippenstein, piping up here again. Let's just give a couple minutes for some folks who might be extricating themselves from other meetings, and then we'll get going. We'll go through the run of the show, as it were, and then we'll have our guest speakers. And we're very appreciative of having you join us today, and look forward to being able to uh, answer questions and obtain feedback from yourselves. So I'll just wait until it reads about 10:02 on my computer here, another couple minutes, and then we'll get launched right in.
سلام مهدی جان، چطوری؟ خوبی؟ خواستم بگم که امین بابا برای خودش گفت و بعد دکتر خواست گفت نمونه برداری کن. بعد که باباش گفتش که قبلا رو سرم لک بوده.
Sounds like someone's got a bit of audio in the background there. Would you be able to just mute yourself real quick? Thank you very much. Okay. All right, so yes, thank you all for joining us. It looks like we have about 80 folks in the meeting right now, so thank you very, very much. I'll get started here. I'm again, oh, sorry, oh, yeah, here we go. Yes, I'm Matthew Klippenstein. I'm the Regional Director for Western Canada for the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. Bit of a long name there. I'm also the Executive Director for Hydrogen BC, which is a provincial affiliate within BC for that association. We're a relatively small group, about 7 people, I think, countrywide. Owing to British Columbia's strong historical hydrogen sector, there are a number of us here in BC. We have some folks in Ontario as well, and we're building up a team in Alberta. There are affiliate groups in Quebec, Hydrogen Quebec, and in Atlantic Canada as well. So we're kind of the national body for hydrogen, as well as fuel cell technologies. And we're an industry association, much like, I suppose there's probably a Canadian Steel Association or a Forestry Products Association. The webinar here is supporting BC's hydrogen sector with geological research and community action. We'll have speakers from the province of British Columbia, the Ministry of Energy, Mines, Low Carbon Innovation. We'll have some speakers, a couple speakers from Geoscience BC, and we'll also have a speaker from the city of Prince George. Let's see, maybe to give a very quick background, not to steal anyone's thunder, but really quickly, as we move towards a net zero country, net zero world, a lot of the energy, a lot of the heavy lifting of emissions reductions will be done by clean electricity and clean hydrogen. Clean hydrogen will have a kind of a smaller role. Maybe it's the Robin to the Batman of clean electricity, but it's a sizable role and a role that can really have a lot of potential, especially in regions such as British Columbia. We didn't have like an advantage when it came to wind energy. We didn't really have an advantage when it came to solar energy or battery manufacturing, but we do have a very strong historical background and expertise in some hydrogen related technologies, and so that's something we can do to ultimately grow jobs while we reduce emissions. Again, this is something of a this is a joint webinar featuring a number of guest speakers. And so at this point, I think I will turn it over to David Coburn, who's with the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. He'll give a bit of an introduction to the BC Hydrogen Office. This is as opposed to Hydrogen BC. It's a little bit convoluted, I know, but the BC Hydrogen Office is an office within the Ministry of Energy, Mines, Low Carbon Innovation. Hydrogen BC is us trade association folks. So perhaps I'll hand it over to David at this point.
Great, thank you, Matthew. I'm just going to share my screen. Apologies. Let's see. And just let me know if everybody can see the full screen for my presentation, or if they're getting the notes view, which nobody wants to see.
Seeing the screen.
Full screen, perfect. Okay, so diving right into it. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. As Matthew mentioned, my name is David Coburn. I'm the Director of the BC Hydrogen Office with the Ministry of Energy and Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. I'm pleased to join you virtually from the territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, specifically the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, whose relationship to these lands continue today. So the aim of my presentation is really to help provide a BC government perspective on the hydrogen opportunity and to help set the stage for Randy, Richard, and Declan's presentations that will follow mine. So I'll start by providing a quick introduction to hydrogen. Might be a little elementary for the group here. I've noticed some very familiar names, so appreciate that many of you are experts in the field already. I'll also touch on the opportunities for hydrogen in BC as we see it, and then I'll move on to the BC hydrogen strategy and the work that we have taken so far to implement that strategy. So getting right into it, an overview of hydrogen. Most of you know hydrogen is a key energy carrier. It's the most abundant element on Earth, and you'll often find it bonded to something else like water or methane as CH4. Hydrogen's very energy dense, 2.5 times the energy density of natural gas by weight. However, the molecule is tiny and takes up a lot of space. Therefore, by volume, as in cubic meters, it's about 1/3 the energy density of natural gas. So it's a very safe fuel. It's extremely quick to diffuse, and it's non-toxic. And it's been used to produce electricity when combined with oxygen in a fuel cell. So it can also be combusted or burned to produce heat, and at the point of use, it doesn't produce any carbon emissions. When injected into the natural gas grid, renewable hydrogen can also displace fossil fuels for heating homes and businesses. And because it's extremely versatile, hydrogen presents a compelling opportunity to decarbonize different applications in BC where direct electrification is not practical. There are 4 main production pathways that I'd like to quickly touch on this morning. Gray hydrogen is the most common production pathway used in industry today. It's also the most carbon intensive. Over 95% of the world's hydrogen is produced via steam methane reforming, meaning that high heat steam is used to break a methane molecule so that carbon monoxide and hydrogen is produced. Blue hydrogen is the same process using steam methane reforming, but adding carbon capture and storage at the point of combustion. So BC is home to abundant natural gas reserves and significant geological carbon storage capacity, which I believe Randy and Richard will touch on later. And so with these attributes, we feel that BC is really well positioned to supply the growing global demand for low carbon blue hydrogen. Turquoise hydrogen is another methane reforming pathway, but without oxygen. So solid carbon is produced as a byproduct. No hydrogen is globally produced via this pathway at scale, but the technology is very interesting and progressing rapidly. Finally, we have green hydrogen, and this is the pathway that's really getting a lot of attention worldwide as it uses electricity to split water, resulting in hydrogen and oxygen. So with more than 98% of electricity generated in BC being clean or renewable, we feel this has a significant, this represents a significant opportunity to produce green hydrogen from electrolysis. Touching on the potential roles for hydrogen in BC, there are several end uses for hydrogen as highlighted in this graphic here. Hydrogen can be used to reduce emissions across a number of different sectors, including the hard to decarbonize sectors like medium and heavy duty transportation, industry and refining, exporting hydrogen using ammonia as an energy carrier to key export markets like Japan, South Korea, China, and the United States. And it's our view that BC has several competitive advantages for producing low carbon hydrogen and competencies across all of these sectors and export markets. So how does all this really fit within the BC's government context? Well, Clean BC lays out the government of BC's plan for achieving 40% greenhouse gas emission reductions by 2030, and that's from 2007 levels, increasing right up to 80% reductions by 2050. So very ambitious plans. The BC Hydrogen Strategy builds on the Clean BC plan by establishing a policy framework to help implement a robust regulatory framework that accommodates the emerging hydrogen industry. It helps to incentivize the production of low carbon hydrogen and create regional hydrogen hubs to serve domestic and export markets. The strategy lays out 63 key actions over the short, medium, and long term to help realize this vision. These include actions like delivering financial supports for deploying fuel cell electric vehicles and infrastructure, building out the robust policies to encourage hydrogen use in the transportation sector, establishing things like the Clean Industry and Innovation Rate, which offers discounted electricity rates for hydrogen production, and other actions. A lot of work has been done over the past few years to implement this strategy. I've highlighted a few here on the screen. The BC Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy was created to advance BC-based decarbonization technologies and intellectual property in support of BC's economic objectives. The BC Hydrogen Office, which I am part of, was created and serves really as a one-stop shop for energy proponents to help them navigate the regulatory process and come to positive final investment decisions on their projects. We've introduced legislation to expand the BC Energy Regulator, which was formerly the BC Oil and Gas Commission, and expand its responsibilities to include hydrogen, ammonia, and methanol. We're also doing a lot of work to engage First Nations and communities and organizations in really collaborative dialogue to ensure that First Nations particularly can participate in the clean energy opportunities in BC. Moving forward, there's still a lot of work for us to do, and we're now looking to complete a regulatory mapping study. This report will help to provide clarity on the regulatory landscape in BC. Will be used to inform discussions on any regulatory gaps that need to be addressed as this hydrogen sector develops further. So we'll not sure when that will be released, but it should be coming out fairly soon. We continue to work, as I mentioned earlier, very collaboratively with industry and First Nations and municipalities to explore the potential for developing hydrogen projects and regional hydrogen hubs where production and demand can be co-located. We're also supporting the development of the new Energy Action Framework, which was a recent announcement that some of you might be familiar with, to meet our climate targets and further our efforts to build a clean energy economy in BC. This work will include the creation of a BC Hydro Energy Task Force that will help to electrify BC's economy. And this, I wanted to mention, this is really going to be a critical piece to advancing green hydrogen projects in BC. Lastly, I just wanted to leave you all with some key considerations and thoughts when thinking about the hydrogen industry and sector. Hydrogen offers many different benefits, including creating new economic development opportunities, new jobs. It helps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those are all fantastic. However, hydrogen isn't the silver bullet, and like all energy sources, there will be challenges and trade-offs and barriers that we need to overcome. Producing low carbon hydrogen is not cheap, and there are potential ratepayer impacts that need to be considered when introducing hydrogen into the energy mix. Not all technology pathways are ready for commercialization, as I mentioned with turquoise and pyrolysis technology that's still to be developed. And it will be important to engage with communities, First Nations, and others early and often to ensure that the public is aware of the hydrogen opportunities that are available to us in BC. And so that's really the end of the presentation. I just wanted to provide the sort of BC government context and set the stage for the next few presentations. So thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to present. Happy to answer any questions you might have. I've also mentioned to one of the participants that my email address is presented on the screen. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out after the webinar, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have then. So thanks again for having me, and back to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much, David. Yeah, let's just hold the questions for now until the end, so that our future speakers don't wind up getting a little bit time jammed. I do want to apologize for not including a land acknowledgement in my opening remarks. David gave a good reminder there. And so working from this little home office, bedroom office in Coquitlam, I do want to acknowledge that this portion of the CHFCA operates in the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. I do want to thank the Coquitlam who continue to live on these lands and care for them, along with caring for the waters and all that is above and below. On which topic, what is below, that might be a good segue towards introducing Richard Truman and Randy Hughes from Geoscience BC, seeing as, well, Geoscience wouldn't really deal with stuff that is at land level or above. So Richard and Randy, do you want to unmute yourselves?
Hi, thank you, Matthew. It's Richard here. I'm just going to share my screen. Just can you just confirm, Matthew, that you can see my screen okay?
Yep, coming through okay.
Perfect. Thank you. So thank you, Matthew, and to the Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell team for organising today's webinar, and thanks for David for giving us a really good overview on the strategic framework, as it were. My name is Richard Truman, so I'm the Vice President of External Relations with Geoscience BC, and I'm joined here today by my colleague Randy Hughes, and Randy is our manager of Energy and Water. I'm joining you today from Vancouver, and I'm grateful to live, to work, and to play on the territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish nations, but I'm also grateful to all of the nations where our research is taking place for allowing us to work in their territories, but also for their input on the research that Geoscience BC is doing. So today I'll talk a little bit about Geoscience BC generally, and then I'll hand over to Randy to talk about some of our past, our current, and our future projects that will help to drive BC's hydrogen economy. So first up, a little bit about Geoscience BC. We are a not-for-profit society that delivers earth science or geology research, and all of the reports and all of the data from our research become public through our website at geosciencebc.com. The research that we manage, we see as the first link in the supply chain for Canada's net zero emissions economy. So we focus on critical minerals and metals, we focus on cleaner energy, and we focus on carbon capture and storage. And that research is used by governments, it's used by industry, by communities and Indigenous groups to improve knowledge, to inform development and investment decisions, to create new socioeconomic opportunities, and also to stimulate innovation and geoscience technology. So hopefully you can see how all of those are really relevant to the hydrogen conversation that we're having here today. Importantly, in terms of how you can get involved with Geoscience BC, Geoscience BC has made some important changes over the last year or two to make the organisation even more collaborative and more inclusive as well. So, for example, we are encouraging governments and industry and economic development trusts and others to fund our research. Last year, we launched some new membership classes, and this is a great way to demonstrate support for our research, but also it's an opportunity to be more involved in the design and the direction of our future research projects, or what we call the project concepts that you'll hear a little bit more about from Randy soon. And we're really pleased to have some of our members on the call here today. So the Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association, for example, is a member, as is the City of Prince George, who you'll be hearing from later on. So if you want to be involved in research that is driving the net zero emissions economy, then please join Geoscience BC. There's a QR code on the screen, or you can go straight to geosciencebc.com. So now I am going to pass you over to Randy to talk a little bit about some of our past, our current, and our future research and how it's relevant to a growing hydrogen sector. Randy, over to you.
All right, thanks, Rich. So as Rich mentioned, I'm Randy Hughes. I'm the manager of Energy and Water for Geoscience BC. And at Geoscience BC, we understand that geoscience research is important to support and help guide decision-making and development of clean energy initiatives, including hydrogen projects. And our research in carbon capture and storage and geothermal energy helps provide that critical science. We know that some hydrogen production methods generate carbon dioxide, or CO2, as a byproduct, and that having carbon capture and storage, or what we call CCS, available is an option to safely store these emissions. So our recent, current, and upcoming projects provide information that is needed to identify, assess, and quantify carbon storage potential in subsurface zones and sedimentary basins in BC and through carbon mineralization. Geothermal energy can provide power to generate hydrogen, and our geothermal research has guided investment decisions by First Nations and the clean energy industry. I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the Geoscience BC's recently completed and current projects that relate to carbon capture and storage and geothermal, as well as some of our project concepts in those research areas. So next slide, please, Rich. All right. For recently completed and current projects, I'm going to begin with our Northeast BC Geological CCS Atlas project. I'm going to start by giving a quick introduction of what Geological CCS is. which is the storage of CO2 in the subsurface, predominantly in deeper zones where the temperature and pressure are high enough that CO2 is in a supercritical phase, meaning that CO2 is in a fluid state and a much greater volume of CO2 can be sequestered in a given storage space. CO2 can be stored in suitable depleted gas or oil reservoirs, deep saline aquifers, or in coal seams. Identifying and assessing suitable CCS sites proximal to CO2 emission sites is an important component of clean energy research. The Northeast BC Atlas project, undertaken by Canadian Discovery Limited, identified, assessed, and ranked the most suitable CO2 storage sites in the Northeast BC area of the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, focusing on existing depleted gas pools and deep saline aquifers. This project was funded by the BC Hydrogen Office as part of the BC Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the Hydrogen Office for their funding. The project results were made public in January of this year, and the study found that there is considerable CO2 storage potential in Northeast BC. The ability to sequester CO2 in Northeast BC will help low carbon intensity hydrogen projects in that region. Next slide, please, Rich. The next project I'm going to talk about is the carbon mineralization research we've supported at the University of British Columbia. So carbon mineralization is a naturally occurring chemical reaction when CO2 comes in contact with mafic to ultramafic rocks. The chemical reaction uses CO2 to generate magnesium carbonate minerals in the host rock. And once they're formed, they provide a stable and permanent form of CO2 storage. Geoscience BC's current project, Carbon Mineralization Potential Assessment of British Columbia, is being led by Dr. Greg Dipple of the University of British Columbia. The research is using existing public geoscience data sets to map and assess serpentinized ultramafic rock bodies in the province. The project is showing that there are potentially large volumes of shallow bedrock in BC that could be suitable for CO2 mineralization, either through mining the rock and exposing it to CO2 or through injecting CO2 underground. Injection technology has been tested in Iceland in basaltic rocks, and our next step is to develop a pilot project to test this technology at field scale in ultramafic rocks. And I'll talk more about this in a few minutes in our project concept section. So next slide, please. For geothermal, Geoscience BC to date has focused on areas with the highest potential for geothermal electrical generation. The map on the right is a heat flow map of BC with the pink and red colors highlighting areas having the highest geothermal energy potential. At Clark Lake in Northeast BC, our early research guided the Fort Nelson First Nation to proceed with the Tudeka electrical generation project. And at Mount Meager in the Southwest BC Garibaldi Volcanic Belt, our research has helped drive Mount Meager Development Corporation's low carbon hydrogen generation project. We also continue to look for new geothermal projects in BC, particularly in the northwest and southeast areas of the province. And so with that, I'll move next to our project concepts and talk about 3 of the carbon capture and storage projects that we're working on. Next slide, please. So I'll just note that our concepts are in the early stages and we're looking for partners to collaborate with, provide project guidance, and provide project funding. Richard will say a little bit more about this at the end of the presentation. The first concept is a follow-up to our carbon mineralization assessment I presented earlier and utilizes learnings from UBC's CarbMin lab and other world-leading expertise to test carbon capture and storage in ultramafic rocks. So in this phase, we're designing and assessing the feasibility of a pilot scale CO2 injection test into a single well. The target rock formation would potentially be able to mineralize over 1 million tons of CO2, and we already have funding interest from several entities on this exciting project. Next slide, please, Rich. Okay, our next concept is for the Southwest BC Geological CCS Atlas, similar to what we produced for Northeast BC, and we're in discussions with several entities for research collaboration on this. This project would focus on the lower mainland area of BC and provide fundamental science to understand the technical potential to sequester CO2 in deep saline aquifers in this area. The map on the right is the BC lower mainland. It shows the major greenhouse gas emission sites as blue dots, and the largest emitters are circled in red. Understanding the potential for deep CO2 sequestration in this area will help inform decision-making by multiple entities. And CCS potential in this area could be beneficial for some hydrogen projects close to the largest population center in the province. Next slide, please. The final CCS concept I'm going to talk about is the one that's closest to Prince George. And this is our Central Interior BC Geological CCS Atlas concept, focusing on the large 75,000 square kilometer Nechako Basin, which is shown in green on the map on the right. Prince George is on the upper right side of the map, and Kitimat and Terrace are on the upper left side, just for reference and scale. The first phase of this project would focus on gathering all of the existing technical data and assessing that data for CCS potential. There's been a fair amount of seismic research undertaken to date in the basin, but only 12 exploration wells have been drilled. These are shown as red diamonds on the map. Reviewing the existing data is a critical first step to understanding the CCS potential here, and this potential may assist hydrogen project development in central BC. We're developing a network of collaborative partners, including the City of Prince George, First Nations Climate Initiative, BC Energy Regulator, and of course the Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association joining us here today. Our project concept intent is to generate a carbon capture and storage atlas similar to that of Northeast BC, albeit with less information available in the Nechako Basin. So our Northeast BC CCS Atlas provides a template to evaluate the data that's available in the Nechako Basin, and in particular for CO2 sequestration in deep saline aquifers. The map on the right is Northeast BC, and it's taken directly from our Northeast BC Atlas. The yellow to red colors show the areas of best potential to store CO2 in deep aquifers in that area. Just for scale and reference, Prince George is at the bottom of the map in the middle, and the Nechako Basin is southwest of Prince George. So our goal is to generate a similar map and all the associated data for the Nechako Basin. I want to note that the Nechako Basin has volcanic rocks covering a large part of its surface area, which is, as I've said, a very large area. And part of our project concept is to undertake a high-level evaluation of the potential for carbon mineralization in this project, as well as the subsurface sequestration potential. And I'll just close with, despite there being less technical data available for this project, our goal is to evaluate the CCS potential with a focus on finding potential as close as possible to the Prince George area to assist with their hydrogen hub efforts in that regard. So thank you. And with that, I'll hand it back to Rich for a few comments.
Cool. Thank you, Randy. So yeah, a reminder, we're looking for people to contribute ideas, their input, their interest, as well as in-kind support and funding for those project concepts that Randy was talking about today. So the pilot scale carbon mineralization project, the Southwest BC Carbon Capture and Storage Atlas, and also the Central Interior Carbon Capture and Storage Atlas, which is super relevant today because we have a talk from the City of Prince George coming up, and being able to identify opportunities for storing carbon close to Prince George, I think, is a priority. So you've heard from David with that kind of strategic overview. You've heard a little bit from Geoscience BC about some of the things that we're doing in terms of geological research to drive forward the hydrogen industry. And I think coming up next, you'll hear a little bit from Prince George about some of the things that are happening on the ground there. So in terms of our research, full details about the project concepts and about Geoscience BC membership can be found at geosciencebc.com, or you can just grab the QR code that's on the screen there, and really looking forward to hearing any questions that people have after the presentation from the City of Prince George. But for now, Matthew, I think we're heading back to you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Richard. At this point, as Richard noted, we'll move over to the City of Prince George. We have Declan Corstania, who is the Manager of Economic Development, who will talk about the opportunity to develop a central BC hydrogen hub. So, Declan, over to you.
Thanks, Matthew. Do I have the controls to share my screen? There we go. All righty. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Declan Corstania. I'm the Manager of Economic Development at the City of Prince George here on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Lheidli First Nations. We thank them for the beautiful, beautiful community that we get to live on and live, work, and play, and for the relationship that we're building with their elected leaders and their staff and their community. It's quite a beautiful region. I'm a fairly new resident, moved here about 10 months ago, and I'm loving it here. So I'm here to speak about hydrogen hub development, particularly for the City of Prince George and sort of northern and central BC. So we'll sort of go through and I'll give a little bit of background about the city and where this is coming from and then therefore where it's going to. So Prince George, a little bit about us, is we're the largest center in northern BC. We're the largest community north of Kamloops, and as such, we've become sort of the northern capital. We're an education hub with the University of Northern British Columbia and the College of New Caledonia. We're an innovation hub with the Northern Analytical Lab Services out of the university, as well as our Hub Space Tech and Innovation Accelerator, and the Wood Innovation Research Lab and the work that's being done on mass timber. And then we're also central. We're central and close, sort of equidistant to the Port of Prince Rupert, the Northeast and the activity that's happening there, Alberta, and the Lower Mainland. So as such, we've sort of become, we used to be a mill town. We do still have quite an active mill and forest product economy. However, we've diversified much since then, and this project is one of those opportunities that we hope to continue to diversify our economy. A little bit more about us with hydrogen. We're already home to some hydrogen projects. Hydra Energy is it's a really exciting pioneer in the sector. They have a technology that does a co-combustion diesel and hydrogen retrofit to existing trucks, and that's shown to reduce emissions and improve efficiencies. They tested their technology in Prince George in the region, and now we're soon to become home to their refueling station, which will be the world's largest hydrogen refueling station. In addition to that, hydrogen is also being produced, invented through other projects. So Tidewater Renewables is a soon to be online renewable diesel facility here in Prince George, and hydrogen is part of their feedstock. And as well as the pulp chemical plants in Prince George, hydrogen is one of the byproducts. We also have supportive infrastructure. So BC Hydro's infrastructure, as David mentioned, is incredibly important to the sort of decarbonization of the energy sector. And we have quite it's a significant piece of infrastructure to BC Hydro. Our Wilson substation is one of those pieces that is it accepts a 500 kilovolt line from the Northeast, and if things go the way they're going, there'll be another 500 kV line going out west. We're also home to CN's intermodal facility, and we're on the line out to Prince Rupert's Port. We're on Highway 16 and 97. You can access a majority of the province's landmass. And on top of that, we have an international airport with cargo capacity, making sort of us a logistics and energy hub. In addition to that, the project starts to evolve. And so with Canada's strategy of achieving net zero emissions by 2050, trying to support and encourage that movement, Clean BC was updated to change their reduction targets, as well as the BC Hydrogen Strategy that was released, and it speaks to development of regional hubs, so the co-location of production and use of hydrogen, and expanding the use of the product across multiple sectors. So when we talk about Central BC and the Central BC Hydrogen Hub, you can see on the map there, it's sort of the northern trade corridor, Prince Rupert to Prince George, and slightly south and north of us. And this is the reason being that, you know, we connect with the communities and the regional sort of transportation corridor, manufacturing and logistics corridor, and the people in the population and the workforce required to do so. And so what we've come to with our Hydrogen Hub project is, you know, using our advantages, our existing location advantages, we're going to sort of act as a guinea pig for our central northern BC community counterparts through the permitting opportunities, engagement and learning some lessons as we go, and building partnerships along the way. We're going to try to find out where hydrogen fits, where it's most impactful, and where it can sort of step in where, you know, electrification and other low carbon fuels may not be as effective, and hopefully ultimately streamlining and clarifying the processes and making time to production and to market as fast and smooth as possible. So part of our project is a set of deliverables, and this is sort of our first step and first crack at it. So we've already started to build a network of partners and opportunities. You know, Geoscience BC is one of them, and we've spoken to a good chunk of our regional and local partners, municipalities, First Nations, and Indigenous groups, business groups, you name it. And we're continuing to expand that. We've reached out as far to Prince Rupert and the Port Authority there as well. And from there, we're going to be working through a permitting case study, essentially, where we'll take some proxy projects, some scenarios, and run through, do some dry runs through how we would process them, find our speed bumps, and clarify that for ourselves. And as we learn from it, we can share that information across the corridors. As we know that when new technology, new projects come along, it can be a little bit of a shock. But if we and our community counterparts are prepared and understanding and educated on how things work and how they could go, not only can we support that development, but the developments can feel that support, and we may benefit from their development in our communities. And then on top of that, we're going to, you know, speak to the economic opportunity. So producing well-researched resources for investors, proponents, and being able to speak to the economic opportunity across the region, and then speaking to you know, industry, community leaders, Indigenous groups, industry associations, to learn about concerns, and then and you know, perceived opportunities, as well as just speak about the regional and economic opportunity for central and northern BC. And at the end of it all, we'll sort of summarize it and be able to share that information with the public and with other communities and industry, and hopefully speak to how we can sort of move towards next steps. So far, we've been doing all right. We've already kicked off things with learning about what's going on. We've spoken to, like I said, to local and regional entities, and we're already diving into the region-specific opportunities for central and northern BC. The permitted case study is underway, and we're continuing to reach out to industry. You'll see us next at the Canada North Resources Expo here in Prince George, about 1,000 people in the industry in industrial sectors will be coming through the trade show there. Will be able to engage with us and sort of chat us up, and we'll be able to further that conversation. And this project will go through to the end of 2024, where we'll try to identify the next steps to keep that momentum going. And that's about it. We're still learning and growing through this this process and building our network of businesses and associations and communities that are intrigued and keen on the opportunity and want to learn with us. And so there's my contact information there. Please follow up, and I look forward to speaking more to this and answering any questions that you may have.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Declan. That's very helpful. Love the timeline outline. In terms of folks asking questions, a couple ways we could do that. If you want to raise your hand, if you're courageous enough to speak in front of a whole bunch of strangers, like in elementary school back in the day, you can do that. Or you could also type your question into the chat. We'll get to the questions as quickly and as best we can. Just to kick things off a little bit, I do have some earlier questions that I'd prepped ahead of time. This is for David on the Ministry of Energy, Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation side. Do you have any statistics on like the number of projects which you've been contacted with the BC Hydrogen Office, number of projects that you might have been be assisting or prospective investor interest? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely, and thank you, Matthew, for putting me on the spot with some additional questions. Yes, no, the BC Hydrogen Office tracks projects that we are engaged on. However, it's not an exhaustive list. We're aware that municipalities, First Nations, and others are also engaged with proponents on different projects, and so we do track and manage a list of projects internally for the purposes of communicating the status of projects up through our senior executives, but it's not an exhaustive list, and so we can't claim to know about all the projects out there.
For sure.
Yeah.
I suppose one distinction between maybe where some hydrogen projects might be a little bit different from, say, mining projects. So with a mining project, either the mine gets built in a particular location or it doesn't get built. It is less common for one mining company to be advancing, say, 3 or 4 different projects in different jurisdictions. So I suppose one consideration might be that with hydrogen projects, our neighbors to the south are very eager to develop their own clean hydrogen supply. So that is something that is a little bit different from mine or no mine, dam or no dam, and so forth. Just moving on then to Geoscience BC. Please do submit your questions as you have them. I'm not sure if this would be more of a Richard question or perhaps a Randy question, but in terms of the timelines of this, I imagine it would be a multi-year process to go from doing your first atlas to the other more detailed geoscience work to establish how much CO2 one can bury and sequester from atmosphere in a location. Do you have a sense of what the timelines would be where we might have a carbon mineralization project in, say, northeastern BC or some of the other basins you've talked about, having everything set up, I suppose?
Thanks, Matthew. That's a good question. I'll start, and then maybe Rich can add in. But so one of the advantages we have on most of our project is that they can be split into phases. With respect to the central BC and the Chaco Basin, there's potential, pending funding and collaboration with various entities. There's potential to get started on that very quickly, and the initial phase of that would gather, review essentially all of the existing data and research that's been done, but look at it with the lens of carbon capture and storage. And to our knowledge, that hasn't been done before. It's been looked at for mining. It's been looked at for oil and gas resources. It has not been looked at for carbon capture and storage. So given that there's a lot of existing data, that's there, seismic surveys, the 12 wells that have been drilled, those could be looked at fairly quickly. And, so we could start, I'll just say start a project within 2023 and then add additional phases, following that on what would be a longer term multi-year project timeline. So hopefully that answers the question.
Sure, that helps a little bit there. I don't want to pivot over to the chat questions before inviting Declan to offer a little bit of color on his end as well. With Prince George's early pioneering work in hydrogen, with hydro energy, are there any immediate learnings or things that you might relay to maybe other municipalities whose folks might be on board, some early lessons or things of that sort?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think, we're still learning. So they're working through their permitting processes right now. And I think just being new to it, I think also allows us to share that information across the community where it won't be brand new, understanding an electrolyzer and, the use of, for example, this project in particular, project is set to use city water and BC Hydro power. It's fairly simple from a very high level, and so finding the location in the community that works for that, the zoning that works for that, and then the sort of permitting processes that work for that. I think that's sort of exactly what we're doing here, is understanding some feedback from them, as well as clarifying and smoothing along, does somebody fit into a heavy industry zone versus a light industrial zone, or somewhere in between? And how do you define that? How do you interpret your own bylaws and processes? And so by understanding the project itself, we can therefore have less guesswork within the confines and within the sort of reading between the lines or interpreting our own bylaws. We can be a little bit more sure of what's going on, of what the project actually is, and moving it along a little bit faster. I think so far so good. Our rezoning for the project went smoothly, and the next piece is into permitting. So and I think there's a few other projects. For example, I mentioned Tidewater Renewables. That project is also similar. It's a quite large project as well. And although not hydrogen, it is a lower decarbonized fuel and a fuel production facility. So we're getting a few opportunities to learn and improve our processes as we go along, as these projects pop up.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much there, Declan. I can imagine that being a trailblazer, it'll be very helpful for other, I guess, peers in the municipal world to hear from you how things are going, as opposed to from an outside group such as myself, who honestly, I don't know that much about municipalities, in all fairness. Okay, so moving on, it looks like Barbara Okay, sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name, had asked if there's a sense of what the permitting process would look like for the most likely projects. Well, there we go. Would most be large enough to require an environmental assessment, or would most just need permitting under the Environmental Management Act? Or would the province consider a strategic environmental assessment for this industry as a whole? So I suppose that might be a Declan question with a bit of a riffing from David Coburn as well.
I can speak to the municipal level. So the permitting process, so we're still working our way through it. We right now we're treating it like any other industrial project. So we speak to the proponent and learn more about what exactly is going to be built. There's some work that we've done already to sort of streamline industrial permitting processes through professional reliance, and just sort of limiting the back and forth that we need to do. But as for timelines and things like that, we're working on that. We're learning. And then from there, we do referrals and things to our provincial and federal counterparts. So if there's a requirement there to speak to the BC energy regulator or the EAO or MOE or something like that, that becomes we'll check that off and send that off to them, and we'll get their reference. But that would be a David question from there on out.
Yeah, it's actually a great question, and it probably depends on the project. But essentially, you know, the federal environmental assessment process could apply to a project. The BC environmental assessment could also apply to a project. It just sort of depends on the type and size of project and the location. If it's on federal land, for example, then the federal assessment process would typically apply. And so it just sort of depends on the details of the project, but both of those you know, assessments could apply to a project.
Do you have any ballpark estimates on length? I guess that's kind of a difficult question to answer, but
sorry, length of time to complete
length
an
of the
assessment?
process for assessments, for example.
I couldn't really provide timelines. You know, typically, again, it sort of depends on the type of facility, the you know, the information that's provided to the environmental assessment offices, the back and forth that's required. But typically, it would be a few years to advance through that process.
Okay, and possibly a related question here. Oh, hold on a second. Oh, another environmental assessment from Josh Scapin, asking David if you could provide some color around the value of having a hydrogen-specific office. What problems does it solve? Any challenges? And are other provinces interested in following this path? He's reaching out to see how they can copy this success.
Yes, and I have pasted a response to that question in the meeting chat, but happy to speak to that. So essentially, we were set up as a single window agency to help proponents and communities and First Nations, anybody that's interested in developing a hydrogen project, really advance through that project feasibility right through to final investment decision. So we essentially are a primary liaison to help them navigate the regulatory space, to assist with identifying potential funding opportunities, etc. So we're sort of a one-stop shop. I provided a link to the website, our BC Hydrogen Office website, in the chat. So please feel free to go onto the website, have a look at some of the different services we provide. And as I mentioned, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or would like some support from our office.
Super. All right, next we have David Irwin. What is the current existing market for hydrogen BC? David, I don't want to run your mouth dry. I'm happy to take that one if you'd like. Or
sure. I mean, Matthew, if you'd like to start, I can build off that if needed.
Sure. Yeah. Very quickly. So hydrogen tends to be used as a feedstock in certain industries, certain sectors, making ammonia for fertilizer, for example. We don't do a lot of that in BC. Oil upgrading and refining, we do have some small refineries here in BC, and there's the discussion there that Declan had about Tidewater renewables. In terms of bringing British Columbia into a prosperous net zero in about 27 years. The one large role that clean hydrogen can play is in transportation. Batteries are fantastic for small vehicles. They tend to get a little bit more cumbersome for larger vehicles, such as commercial trucks. And so hydrogen is likely to have a role to play there. The BC Hydrogen Strategy estimated that of the about up to 11% of the emissions abatement from now until 2050, about more than half of that would come in the transportation sector. So heavier, larger transportation vehicles. If hopefully that answers the question. If not, happy to chat with you offline there, David. David Coburn, rather, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I noticed the question was focused on current demand.
Oh,
but,
sorry.
But no. I was just going to say I'd like to sort of speak to the maybe future demand or current global demand, there is a tremendous opportunity in the hydrogen space to export clean energy to countries like Japan, South Korea, China, and the United States. And so I would suggest that is one of our biggest current opportunities for the hydrogen space, and working with many different proponents on advancing projects that are looking at export opportunities. So,
super. Okay, Mark Karja Luoto had inquired about the recording presentations. I just gave a quick reply in there for that. Peter Ronning had asked for Geoscience BC. Do you intend to assess potential geological and environmental risks associated with carbon sequestration?
Yeah, so I'll take
maybe, oh, sorry, go on, Randy.
I was just going to say the answer is yes, but in a staged aspect. So, for example, in our Northeast BC Atlas, and for the project concepts, we look at the geological framework, and we look at the structural framework for those study areas. We identify at a generally a high level the regional seals, the horizontal strata that overlie the identified targets. But it's important to note that as each step progresses towards a potential project, the rigor and evaluation of that project increases, including the identification, assessment, and mitigation of any risk associated with that project. So hopefully that answers the question. Rich, do you want to add a comment?
I think, yeah, just quickly, I mean, what I would add is that for Geoscience BC, we see our role in creating the science that helps to inform decisions. So if that's, looking at investment opportunities, that's often been the case, for example, with our critical minerals and metals work in helping to focus mineral exploration and attract investment. That's been an important part historically of what we've done. But similarly, on the risk side of things, with the natural gas research that we've traditionally done, that's also been looking at the risk and how you help to mitigate some of those risks. And yeah, just a reminder that all of that research is, and future research will be, available publicly as well. So it's a useful tool for industry, or for governments and regulators, or for communities and Indigenous groups to use as well.
Okay, super. Thank you both, Randy and Richard there. So I see we're just about 11 o'clock. We do have a couple of questions left here. I don't want to keep anyone above time though, so we'll go over time if we need to, but while we are still within the time limit, I did want to say a big thank you to David Coburn from the Ministry of Energy, Mines, Low Carbon Innovation, to Richard and Randy from Geoscience BC, and to Declan Corstania from the City of Prince George. Also want to give a very big shout out to Nicholas Hilario. You haven't seen him on the screen here, but he's a colleague at CHFCA who does all the coordination behind this stuff. So very, very appreciative. Thank you hugely to Nicholas there. If you have to jump off at the moment, absolutely feel free. There should be a webinar link or subsequent availability of this webinar. Just inquire with CHFCA for that. And oh geez, it is 11 o'clock. Maybe what I'll do with some of the folks had follow-up questions, and we will try and follow up with you offline for that. Thank you all very much for attending, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please give us some feedback on how we can be supportive of other activities in BC, in your community as well, and how we can improve on our own outreach and so forth. So yes, thank you all so very much, and bye.